Every New Mexican deserves to understand how the law works for them, or why it doesn't work for them. Welcome to New Mexico Legal Lowdown, hosted by attorney Feliz Rael. Each episode, we will help demystify the legal system and uncover misconceptions through real conversations with New Mexico trial lawyers. Produced and powered by LawPods.
This episode is brought to you by the New Mexico Trial Lawyers Association Alliance for Justice. We want to thank our La Justicia Circle supporters, Singleton Schreiber, Nick Rowley, Lori Benko, Sherry LaCour, and McGinn, Montoya, Love, Curry, and Sievers, PA. Through their generous investments, they're safeguarding New Mexicans' right to access justice and a jury. And now, on to our conversation. Hi, welcome to the New Mexico Legal Lowdown podcast. We are trial lawyers or plaintiff lawyers talking about the civil justice system in New Mexico. The laws in New Mexico may be different from the laws in other states. The purpose of the podcast is to provide general information and to demystify the civil legal process in New Mexico. This is not a substitute for appropriate legal advice in any particular case. Please contact a lawyer if you want to talk about your individual case. Today, I am very happy to welcome F. Michael Hart of Martinez Hart, Sanchez, and Romero. I'm so excited to have you as our guest today. Thank you so much. I want you to be able to talk about your firm, but first, my first question is, tell us when you first knew that you wanted to be a lawyer.
Our firm does mostly, not exclusively, but it does a lot of children's legal work in a lot of areas. And I got a job when I was in college, actually working in a elementary school, and it turned out it was in the after school program. And it turned out that my function was really security. I mean, I didn't know that when I applied. I thought I was going to be a teacher's aide or something. Anyway, and there were a lot of kids in the program, in the after school program, they were in foster care. And I didn't know anything about foster care. I didn't know anything about any of that stuff. And so I got to, met a lot of these elementary school children, and I met their workers, their social workers, and I met their, some of them I met their families. And I remember thinking that it was the kind of work I wanted to do someday. I wanted to be involved in that part of the community. And so years later, I, working on some stuff in Washington, D.C., and turns out that a bunch of the people who were doing the same things I was on children's policy issues were all lawyers. And I thought, well, that's what I want to do. So that's when I applied to law school.
You've done it. Your firm is one of very few that specializes in children's rights. This is our sort of back to school episode, and I think you've really realized your dream.
Yeah, I have. It's been great. I mean, I've been doing this for 36, 37 years, and I can tell you that there hasn't been a day that I wasn't excited and happy to go to work. I don't think many people get to say that. It has been it's been wonderful, and I work with great people. I mean, the people I in my firm are just outstanding, and so that makes it a lot easier too.
I'm so glad, and I know that your firm, in representing children, sometimes there are times when you sue private companies for, if a child is harmed. But I think one of the issues that I'd like to talk about today, if you can, is, well, how to protect children, but in particular, and how to protect children in school, what rights children might have. But I think there's been a lot of talk in our community about the Civil Rights Act and what civil rights are. And I wonder, sometimes I think that the average person who's never been to law school doesn't necessarily know what civil rights are. And so can you tell us a little bit about what civil rights are?
Oh yeah, of course. And that's really understandable. It's the word civil rights, those words have been part of our culture and our community for forever. and we all have them, and we all sort of think we have a feeling what they are, our civil rights. But civil rights lawsuits, civil rights litigation is a special area. And it starts with this: only the government can violate your civil rights. All right. So you can be treated really bad. Well, there are a few exceptions. Like in the workplace, that's not entirely true. There's some workplace civil rights issues where an employer discriminates, a private employer discriminates based on race, sex, national origin, things like that. But most of the time, civil rights are the government has a duty to protect them, and so you can bring claims against the government when they fail to do that. So that's kind of the starting place and it can be the federal government, the state government, the most local government you can imagine is in that, it has those same responsibilities. And it makes sense when you think about why we have government, why we all got together at some point way back in the past to create government. We did it to protect each other and each other's rights. If you think about the Bill of Rights, we think of the First Amendment, the Second Amendment, Third Amendment. Those are all statements where the people got together and they said, these are things we believe government should protect each other from. We should protect each other from it, and that's why we have government. So anyway, I don't want to get too far in the weeds, but the idea is that when there are certain responsibilities the government has to each of us, and particularly to our children. And that's an area in which we focus a lot. So one area you just talked about is education. Well, basically we've created an environment where we created law that says every child is entitled to a free and appropriate education. That's public schools, and so we fund public schools.
That both at the federal level and at the state level, or is it more one or the other?
Well, what we've done is at the federal level, we have an agency that at various times is very big and powerful, and right now the administration is paring it down. But it's a agency that is developed to promote that principle, that fundamental principle we have, which is that every kid deserves a good education. Now, beyond that, though, once your child is in school and once your child is at school, we have the civil rights are that they be treated fairly, that they be treated equally. We have underneath that a whole bunch of rules that we've created. For example, we have a rule. Sounds silly now, but it wasn't the rule years ago that the school can't treat children, with one color skin different from children with a different color skin. It sounds sort of silly now, but that was a major issue, and so the civil rights became a topic for that. We created rules that say that children with learning challenges, 1 in 5 kids, by some estimates, have some kind of learning challenge. And so we have rules that say you have to provide for those children. You can't discriminate. You can't treat them differently. You can't shunt them to the side. They're entitled to the same rights to education as everyone else. And so you have those kinds of things. Similarly, we've heard a lot about in higher education, making certain that opportunities for women are the same as they are for men, and that often is brought up in sports or athletics, but it's throughout the educational system. So there are dozens of examples, but the idea is the government has a responsibility to ensure fairness and ensure equality, and we use words like equal protection and things like that to say this is the government's role in ensuring that our kids get treated fairly and get treated equally in this goal of being educated. So that's a long answer. It's a long answer to kind of a short question, but that's at least one way to look at it.
In my mind, civil rights are those rights that are so important that they're in the Constitution, either the federal Constitution or our state Constitution. And I think that for the most part, the constitutional rights are very similar, right? In the federal are to a large extent, our state constitution mirrors the same rights of the federal constitution. But one of the things that I remember learning in law school that was so interesting is that our most New Mexico lawyers and judges feel that the New Mexico Constitution provides for a little bit of a layer of extra protection above and beyond what the federal Constitution allows. Do you agree? Do you think that that's true?
I think I'd say absolutely yes, and particularly in a few areas. And let me give you some background. New Mexico adopted its state constitution after 48 other states had done so, and the federal government had done so. So the framers of a New Mexico Constitution had a lot of stuff to work with. The country had gone through a civil war. We had gone through major exploration of the West. So they were able to look at all these state constitutions, and so they actually made choices. They made specific choices to distinguish New Mexico in some ways, and so that's I can get in the weeds and talk a little bit more about that, but for every New Mexican's from every New Mexican's perspective, there are a few just basic things that we have in our Constitution. One of them is we actually have a stronger Voting Rights Act in the New Mexico Constitution than exists in the federal Constitution. We have equal rights for women in our Constitution, in our Bill of Rights of our Constitution. That does not exist in the federal Constitution. We have laws that have made due process and equal protection cause the government to treat men and women similar, but New Mexico actually said it in their Constitution.
It's a little more direct to make sure that there's no confusion.
So there's some of those things. And then we also have, I think a broader view of how, government in New Mexico. I mean, remember, so some of our law it was held over from the Spanish, and some of our laws held over from Mexico, the Mexican. And so we've adopted some things in our law that are unique. And I'll give you one example is children's rights. New Mexico courts have a special responsibility to children. So if a child has a case in court and Felice, you do a lot of this work, you get called by a judge who says, there's this case, and this case has a child involved. I want my own eyes and ears. I, as a judge, want my own eyes and ears paying attention to what's going on in that case, because I have a special responsibility to that child. Those judges don't have that special responsibility to adults unless they have, disabilities. But those are the kinds of things that we have in our culture and our law that a lot of it came from the Spanish. That was a tradition and an attitude about law and about government that the Spanish felt very, very strongly about in some ways. Anyway, so
I think that's great, and your firm obviously does a lot of this work too. But a person under the age of 18 doesn't have the same rights as an adult, and importantly, they don't have the right to enter into a contract. So they don't have the right to settle a case. That's why someone needs to act on their behalf. And sometimes it's a parent, and sometimes it's just another lawyer. And I think it's beautiful that our judges, and sadly, there are some, I mean, we don't need to talk about it, but there were some cases decades ago where maybe people didn't really protect the rights of children. But I find that our judges are really, really cautious and mindful, and actually really care about making sure that children's rights are protected. And part of that is appointing like a guardian ad litem, and there are different kinds and they have different roles, but if they have special hearings. And if a child is involved in a car accident and they have any kind of medical bills, even if they go to the doctor once, our judges want to hear about those cases to make sure that their rights have been protected, because they understand that children are vulnerable. And I think it gives me a lot of confidence in our legal system in New Mexico.
I agree. And it takes a lot of time. These judges have to devote a tremendous amount of energy. Some of them have 15, 16, 1,700 cases on their dockets, and they will pay attention. They also, if children's rights are at issue, they, under some scenarios, those cases bump the line, and those cases get in front, because the judge knows, and this happens in a lot of settings. But if the rights of a 6-year-old are at stake, it's not okay to wait 2 or 3 or 4 years to get that resolved. Though that child's, 4 years to a 6-year-old, waiting 4 years, that's 3/4 of her life. And so
It's such an interesting question, right? Because my understanding is, okay, and this is not necessarily what we plan to talk about, but I think it's important, and and I'm curious about your thoughts. But one of the ways that I think New Mexico law tries to protect children is by saying, well, since a child can't necessarily, a 6-year-old can't go out and hire a lawyer, we're going to say that when children are harmed, they're going to extend, maybe there's a 3 or a 2-year statute of limitations, and they're going to extend that to 1 year past their 18th birthday, or, just to make sure that they have an opportunity to pursue that claim when they do become adults, if their parents didn't chose not to do that. And so one of the things that it's kind of come up at the legislature has been this idea of extending the statute of limitations even beyond 1 year past the age of 18. Can you talk to us about, like, what the thought is behind that and why that might be appropriate and really important?
of course, yeah. And any of us who are parents, actually any of us who were kids, I suppose, knows what this means. And when you're a child, when you're 17 or 18, it's not realistic to think that, oh, just because I reached my 18th birthday, all of a sudden I am capable of appreciating all of my legal rights, maybe for something that happened when I was 10 or 11. It could be as simple as a car accident, or a water heater blew up and I got burned when I was 8 or 9. Most of us have parents who are looking out for that and taking care of that, but there are children who don't have that. And sometimes the people who are supposed to be taking care of them are actually the ones responsible for allowing it to happen, or even inflicting the injury themselves. And so there's a lot of discussion about
Or they don't know, especially if the child isn't, there's a divorce situation, or, I think parents don't always know what's going on,
of course,
if it didn't happen while they were present.
yeah. And so there's the law is always trying to adjust to be fair to everybody. That statutes of limitations are designed to give people peace of mind that after a certain amount of time, a claim can't be brought against you or me if we made a mistake, or somebody thinks we made a mistake, even if we didn't do anything wrong, but somebody thinks we did. After a certain period of time, the case is closed. It can't be brought up again. On the opposite side of that is, of course, the child, or somebody who doesn't really understand or appreciate what happened to them, or doesn't understand who was at fault or how it happened. So yeah, there's always a tug of war and a balance. But again, judges do a very, very good job of trying to make sure it's fair to everybody. There's a lot of statutes and rules and cases and guideposts to look at. But yeah, the legislature is always looking at that question, particularly for adult survivors of childhood abuse, which is a different topic for a different day. But that's another whole area of people who have very, very legitimate claims, but for whom it has been extremely difficult to unpack all the things that are associated with that kind of childhood trauma, and just doesn't make sense that they should be able to figure that all out when they're 18 or 19 or 20. Again, particularly since sometimes the folks who inflicted the injury are the very ones who are supposed to be protecting them. So anyway,
Yeah.
that's
I feel like a lot of kids who turn 18, they're handling a lot of stuff. They're graduating from high school, trying to figure out college or their first job. They're maybe on their own, living, living out of the house for the first time. I mean, that's a lot to go through to also have to say, oh my gosh, I've got to reflect on, 18 years of, my life and decide whether or not I need to pursue a claim and how do I go about hiring a lawyer? I mean, it's a very, very short amount of time to expect an 18-year-old to just,
yeah.
do their thing. I mean, I guess they'd have to have been planning it for a long time, but seems to me that there's a lot of reasons why we might want to expand that even just a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean,
Yeah.
so and you're talking a little bit about how how our laws and how the Constitution is there to not only protect children from harm, to protect them from bad things, but also to help promote good things in their lives. And I think about it. I think about it all the time, which is our community gets together and decides what we care about and what really matters to us. And there isn't a politician that can't that has ever there's never been a politician who didn't run for office saying children are the future and children are the most important asset and all that kind of stuff. I mean, yeah, it's you have to say that if you're going to run for office, I think. But
And it's true. I
but
mean,
it's that's right. That's right. But actually putting it into motion and is challenging, because the idea that the government should ensure for our kids, should ensure safety. That's the biggest thing is any parent cares mostly about is their kids' safety, their education, their health care. And then don't leave out things like recreation. Like those are the kinds of things we expect as a community. If there are only 20 of us that got together, or there's 200 million of us to get together, those are the kinds of things we all sort of say, yeah, let's do that. Let's do it well. And let's create a government that takes responsibility for it. So now as lawyers, we look at all those, we look at those rules, and we look at that structure. And one of our responsibilities is to ensure that it's actually done the way it's supposed to be done. It sounds simple, but so when we're looking at a case not long ago involving a child in school, and looking at all that whole array of rules and all the things that we say are important to kids, and exploring and examining, did that really, had they done those things, this terrible event would not have occurred to this kid. So that's a big part of what lawyers do. And I'll tell you, the lawyers who represent school districts, that's their job too. So even though we end up against them in these lawsuits, the discussions often become, okay, what are we going to do to make sure this never happens again? What kind of training are we going to do? First of all, how did this happen to this little girl? How did this happen? Where were the failures? Okay, we can fight about those, but ultimately we get to a place where it's, all right, what are we going to do to see that this never happens again? And I got to stress that's a huge part of why it's wonderful to come to work and represent children. It's okay, is looking at how did this happen and what can be done, what can responsible people do to ensure that it never happens again. The truth is, ensure that it's less likely to happen again. Sadly, we're all old enough to know things do happen again, but we got to believe that as a community, we're always trying to work on that and make those things less likely to happen to our kids, so our kids' lives are safer and happier and freer from bad things happening to them.
I was thinking about, I think that a lot of us are expecting there to be a lot of discussion coming up in the next year or so about New Mexico Civil Rights Act. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I think this is kind of how it works. There's the federal, concept of federal civil rights, and if you want to enforce that, you can go to federal court and do that. And federal court can be pretty tough, but if you win, there's no limit. I mean, that jury or that judge, they can just decide here's an amount of money, right? In state court, New Mexico court, we have a Civil Rights Act. And it's a little bit easier to, I don't know if easier is the right word, but there's a statute that says, here's your right to go to court. But it limits the amount of money that you can recover. And I was overheard some people talking about whether the New Mexico Civil Rights Act whether that cap of what people can recover should be lower. And when I think about it, I think, well, if the concern is that the state is paying too much money because the state is violating people's civil rights. In other words, there are teachers, not a lot, but there are teachers out there who are inappropriately touching children, right? That has happened. Or there are teachers who are using very inappropriate language and discriminating against children because of how they look or who their parents are and stuff like that. We don't like it. I'm not saying that happens in every school, but it has happened historically. And my idea is, well, instead of being cranky about paying out for civil rights, why not use some money and hire better teachers who are not going to inappropriately touch students and who are not going to call students, the N word or something like that? I mean, that just seems like a no-brainer. Why not spend money educating teachers about, listen, these are student civil rights. They have a civil right to not be touched in an inappropriate way in class. They have a civil right to not be called the N word or any other derogatory thing in front of other kids. And they have a right to get an education and not be harassed by the teachers and that's just teachers. And I don't mean to suggest that that's, rampant or anything like that. But I mean, how do you react to that?
Well, I just look at the core issue there of whether we should provide a financial remedy for the violation of someone's New Mexico state constitutional rights. There are some people that say no, you shouldn't. That the government, should be able to violate your civil rights, and there's nothing you just can't do anything about it. And that actually, historically, go back a couple hundred years, that was the law. The government could do whatever it wanted, and if you didn't like it, you voted those people out. That was literally your only remedy. You go get somebody, vote that guy out of office. Okay, so this is discussion about whether there should be a financial consequence to the government violating someone's civil rights. And then the further question is, well, which rights? Are we gonna protect every single right, or just some rights that we think are the most important? And beyond that is, as you said, caps, because a cap is just the legislature saying, we don't really care what happened to you. It doesn't matter. This is the absolute maximum amount the government will ever have to pay, regardless of the extent of harm.
No matter how much therapy you're going to need in the future because of how you were treated in school, right?
Right. And people, and again, the government, there are two sides of that argument. I mean, that there are certainly two sides of the argument. A New Mexico employed physician at a New Mexico government hospital, the maximum amount she can be held accountable and liable for, regardless of the malpractice, is, capped. It's a number, and it doesn't matter, what kind of harm the patient suffers, what consequence it is to the patient's family. It doesn't matter. So that's a debate that's going to always be raging, because the opposite side of the coin is people will say, look, if it was unlimited, if a physician at UNM hospital, or the UNM hospital, it should say, has to pay for the full extent of harm if they negligently kill
Not
somebody.
really the ones paying. It's the
It's the
yeah.
hospital, it's insurance, it's a government's insurance. But anyway, but I guess what people leave out of that discussion completely, and it's unfortunate, but it is central to the concept. Money damages, they don't just compensate the individual who is injured, frequently who are devastated. They've lost their job, they're never going to work again, they're incapacitated. Okay, so there's that part. But the other part is us as a community sending a very clear signal. This is not tolerable. We do not accept this. This is not, our Constitution says you can't do this to one of us. You can't do this to one of us. And that actually is,
There are consequences.
to those of us who do civil rights work, that is the long lasting impact of these cases. It's because this family may get compensated, maybe not, maybe compensated some, maybe enough, maybe not enough. Okay, but they get on with their lives. The rest of us have this moment where that starts here and goes into the future. Like, that's not going to happen again, because the government has been 12 jurors, 12 citizens have said, no, that's not okay. And we're going to make you pay money to compensate the people you hurt. And I can tell you that has an enormous effect on policymakers, politicians, government people, folks who are in their jobs throughout the government. That has a real impact. It's a message that they hear loud and clear. And that's so that, I think there's always going to be a debate on what the cap should be. Should there be a cap at all? How high the cap should be? And it's always arbitrary. It's never going to be, you're not going to guess a better number than me. And the next guy down the side, walking on the sidewalk, is going to guess a different number, what the cap should be. But it's a way of protecting the resources of the government. All the money that we pay in taxes aren't at risk in every single lawsuit because there's a cap. But it's also acknowledges that the government has a responsibility, and there are consequences. The government there are consequences to the government and to the government actors when they violate somebody's rights. And that's, I think it's, we've been doing it for a long, long time in this country, and it's shown to be the most effective, way more effective than elections. I'll just tell you, way more effective than elections, than getting government to do the right thing and to stop doing the wrong thing. Lawsuits do that. And it's it is sad that that's the route we go, but it also is beautiful because it's the community itself. It's 12 jurors. It's not me deciding it. It's not you. It's not some politician deciding what's right for you or me. It's 12 people you never met before. And they get together and they say, no, that's not okay. No, that's not all right. Sorry.
I kind of already know the answer to this question, but is it always just about money?
I'm sorry?
Are lawsuits always just about money?
No, that's one of the most beautiful parts of what we get to do, is especially under the Civil Rights Act, but it's also available other ways. There's a whole other huge other, these books behind me, there's a whole batch of books about, it's called injunctive relief or specific remedies, where we don't ask for money at all in our cases. There's no money moving at all. It is simply, this has to change. This,
some ideas about what kinds of changes that you've asked for in lawsuits?
yeah, sure. Like one of them is this is some years ago. It was in the education context, was telling a school district, it wasn't a big school district, it was a small school district, that they had to implement a program to enable kids with special needs to, have access to an educational program. And it was a challenge because this is a small school district, doesn't have a lot of money, but it basically required them to go and hire a professional to come in, look at what their system was, create something in that school. Yeah, and they were saying it's expensive, it's going to be really hard to do that, and no doubt. But from the perspective of the children, there were seven kids who with special needs. From their perspective, it was priceless. It's priceless. I mean, the ability that they could go to school.
Future children.
Yeah.
In that district.
Oh yeah, and the district is doing great now. I mean, it's like now they're really proud of it. They're getting awards. They're being written up for their success. So yeah, that was one. There've been others where we've looked at something as boring and as arcane as a Medicaid regulation that was unfair to some kids based upon just their status as foster children. So that's the kind of stuff we go in and say, hey, wait a minute, change that, fix that. It doesn't make any sense. That's wrong. That's not fair. And so there's no money. There's no money moving. It's just if that one we settled. But if you got all the way to the court, it would be the judge or the jury saying, we're entering an order. We're writing it out on a piece of paper. Here's the order, and it says, you shall no longer do that, and you're gonna fix that, and you're gonna do it better from now on. Here you go.
In that case, I mean, so how do you get paid for your time as a lawyer?
Well, some of us have the ability to do a lot of that kind of work pro bono, but and which basically means it's
important, so you do it.
Yeah, and lots of lawyers, lots and lots of lawyers, particularly plaintiffs' lawyers. I think our friends on the defense side that have to bill their time, they don't do it because they find it really difficult to do. Those of us on this side where we're working with real people and real families and ordinary folks with real ordinary problems every day. It's kind of something you just do. And then sometimes there are fee shifting provisions so that sometimes the court can order the government, if you prevail, if you're able to persuade the court, hey, the government, did this wrong thing or is doing this wrong thing, and they need to be ordered to correct it, then the court can, under certain circumstances, order, in addition to ordering them to fix the problem, ordering that the attorney's fees for whoever brought the case forward get paid. And there's a whole system.
You don't know in advance if the judge is going to order that or not. And I assume you have to just presume that you're not going to get paid. And that's part of the pro bono hours that your firm provides.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know, I don't want to get on a soapbox here, but it is an extraordinary privilege to be able to practice law. I mean, the people of New Mexico, have said, yeah, we want you to be a lawyer. Only a handful of people get to do it. And if you get that opportunity, I went to UNM Law School, which is a public school. People in New Mexico subsidized my education. Yeah, it's a pretty powerful thing to be able to say when somebody comes in your office and they don't have any money and they don't even know what the problem is. And there's like, this is wrong though. Like this shouldn't be happening to my kid. It's a pretty powerful thing to be able to say, well, let me figure that out. Let me work on that for a while. And once in a while, it works. Once in a while, there's, something good comes from it, then that's enough. Many days, that's enough.
We want to take a quick moment to thank our sponsors. This episode is brought to you by the New Mexico Trial Lawyers Association Alliance for Justice. We want to thank our Adobe Pillar supporters, Fadul, Clough, Hardy, and Conaway, LLC, Poulos and Coates, and Tani, Acosta, and Chaparro, PC. Through their generous investments, They're safeguarding New Mexicans' right to access justice and a jury. Now, back to our conversation. For the parents who are sending their kids back to public school, maybe elementary or middle school or whatever, do you have any advice for them about, just things to look out for? Or, I mean, how can our New Mexico parents be good parents when it comes to just looking out for stuff and keeping an eye on being the eyes and ears of the community when it comes to schools and making sure that the kids are safe and have a good experience?
That's great. There's a lot of really useful information that you can get on the internet. There's several organizations that publish sort of checklists or sort of depositories of ideas. I'll tell you just a few things. And I'm cautious because I remember when my kids were growing up, I was really busy. Their mom was really busy. So just adding another thing to the list is just not something most parents need, particularly when the school's supposed to operate without me. I mean, they're supposed to know what they're doing. I'm not a school teacher, so okay, so just make it simple. Simple things like pay attention and listen the best you can. Listen to what is going on at the school to the extent you can be engaged, not only in seeing the environment where your kids are going to be going to school. Um, the more you're able to respond when your child is perceiving something not right. So and people think that's really important in elementary, kindergarten, first, second, third, fourth grade. It's just as important. I would argue even more important middle school and high school, that you have a feel for what's going on there. Your children may not be able to really articulate what's bothering them, but so that's part one. Part two, I guess another piece of it is actually just checking in with your kids and talking to your kids. And as busy as we all are, having a few moments to just keep engaging with them about what's their favorite class. That's easy. The more important question I found is, what class do you like the least? Why is that?
Yeah.
Sometimes it's because the work is just really hard and then they don't like it. They just don't have aptitude for it, and that's part of it. Sometimes it's more complicated. They're getting bullied. There's a kid in that class that just is just mean to them. There's a kid in that class that is sexually harassing them, and by that I mean just saying things about their body, saying things about their dress, saying things that make them uncomfortable. And sometimes it's the teacher is just disengaged and doesn't seem to recognize that, that the kid is struggling and is really having a hard time. And because what happens with children often is, I'm no expert, but after a point, they of being defeated, it's easy to just kind of say, well, I'm no good at this, so I'm just not going to even work at it anymore. And as a parent, it can be a whole semester. It's not until you get the grades you realize, what the heck's going on here? How come my kid's getting a D? And that's all I'm saying is sometimes just saying, what's your least favorite class? Why? Tell me about your friends. Who are the people you like being around? Who are people you don't like being around? And why is it? And if you start talking about that with your kids when they're little, it's natural when it's a little more natural. It's never natural when they're teenagers, but it's a little more natural when they're older. So there's a couple of things that any parent can do. Beyond that, to the extent you can actually volunteer. Beyond that, you can actually tutor. Some parents actually have the luxury, have the time to do stuff like that. But it's just like anything else in your kid's life. Try to pay attention as much as you can and listen, but ask questions and then listen. Ask questions and listen. I found myself as a parent often telling my kids what they were supposed to do and how they're supposed to do it and where they should go and how fast they should get there and all that stuff, And I wish I'd listened more because I think, your kids will talk to you if you give them a chance.
Yeah, I think that's right. Yeah, and just on that point, I was also thinking about like, you know, one thing I tried to kind of engage when my son was in school. And, especially in the younger years, I try to maybe volunteer once a month or once every other month or something like that. But it seems like with some of the cases I've heard about, another just kind of idea or concept to keep in the back of your mind is whether or not the teacher has an appropriate understanding of boundaries.
Yeah. Right.
Um, because some seem to like, I don't know. I've heard of cases that have been concerning. I mean, there are the cases where there's a teacher who's, just mean, right? And saying inappropriate things. But then there are the ones who are really polarizing and just maybe a little too friendly and, texting with a child or, something like that. And to me, that also is kind of it's not something that's automatically, I don't know. To me, that just raises questions about boundaries. Do you have thoughts about that?
Of course, yeah, absolutely. And I would just address that a little bit. Talking to your children, not only about what's happening to them, but what they're seeing happening to others. So you're absolutely right. They used to call it, the teacher's pet or the teacher's favorite or whatever. That usually that's just wrong. It's professionally wrong for a teacher, but it also is an indication of a boundary issue, potentially, not always, but potentially, a boundary issue. And your child may not be the target of it, but the extent to which your child is seeing that, it's almost certainly making them uncomfortable. And
Yeah.
that's and getting them to talk about that. And then, addressing it to the school counselor, addressing it to someone in the school administration that you hopefully have some relationship with by now because you've showed up a couple times or you've been there. But I want to expand it. That issue of boundaries isn't just school teachers, it's coaches, it's
Yeah.
it's clergy, it's any time your child is involved in a swim team, you know, basketball programs after school, boys club, girls club, YMCA, anytime your kid is involved in something where there's adult supervision and you're not physically there all the time, talking to your child about that. And it's just as important that they talk about what they see happening to others as to themselves. Because frequently we find we do lots and lots of lawsuits and cases for children who have been exploited by adult caretakers, whether they be private in those settings. We've big brothers, big sisters, boys club, girls club, all those kinds of things. Girl Scouts, Boy Scouts, Little League, virtually any organization that focuses on children is going to have people volunteering or working there whose motives may not be 100% pure. All right, doesn't mean they're all.
Hopefully they don't come with name tags
Right.
or
That's right.
t-shirts that say predator.
And they're not all predators, they're not all pedophiles, but
Right.
sometimes the boundaries, they don't understand boundaries. So anyway, that's it's very important that your kids learn those things through your questioning them and talking to them about it. Like if that makes you feel uncomfortable, why does it make you feel? Well, that's your feelings are correct, son or daughter, and that's something to talk to me about. And it is really our experience is that the victim herself or himself often is in a really compromised situation. The predators, people who exploit children, use very sophisticated techniques to silence that child, to make that child feel like there's reasons why they can't talk, either out of fear or out of this very corrupt notion that we're special, we got a special relationship here. It's very sophisticated, very complicated on one level, and on the other level, it's just plain wrong. It's just wrong. And so often a child on the team can go home and tell her mom, I saw coach and teammate, hanging around after practice, and he asked her if she wanted to go get a Coke. Well, by itself, that's not necessarily, corrupt,
Right.
but it's still wrong. Still wrong and still not appropriate and still something that can be corrected. It could be someone who's ignorant and just not cognizant of the rules. It could be much more serious. But one way or the other, the way we as a society learn about it is through the other kids. It's rare that they pull that stuff in public. They rarely do those kinds of things in front of folks who are paying attention or who have, you know, a good idea of right and wrong. Anyway,
Yeah. 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 Oh
but
my.
anyway, we talked a lot about the awful, sad stuff and terrible stuff. But one of the things to talk about going back to school, it's an exciting, wonderful time, and a lot of kids, mine included, myself included, was always really anxious. Like, I don't know what class I'm going to be in, who my friends are going to be, whether any of my friends will even be there again, and all those things are a time of a lot of anxiety. It's a lot of time of um, change, particularly if you're going from elementary to middle to high school. Those are kinds of things, and I think that yeah, our job, with some of the cases we do, like um, a kid that is now eligible to play varsity sports. All right, it's so exciting. It's so exciting to be in a high school where I can maybe go out, or I'm going to play on the freshman team, perhaps. Well, there's a lot of new things, new rules, and so safety becomes like this whole new thing to think about. So, for example, the reminding your child that her or his safety is very, very important. As the kids grow older, I think it was true for my kids. I coached for years and years and years, and I can tell you that that as kids get older, coaches, teachers, administrators, they believe children are much more autonomous and capable of protecting themselves and looking out for themselves. Some of them are, right? Some of them aren't. And so that's another thing that to be thoughtful of. If your child is going into an environment and they're expressing to you anxiety, stress, listen to that and try to help them adjust to that. It's not a legal thing so much. You hope it doesn't turn into a legal thing, but it's one of those areas in which, if it's not addressed, and you're not paying attention to it, it can turn into something that is negative and hurtful to them. So,
To be fair, I mean, my son went to public school throughout. By and large, his teachers were incredible, supportive. I mean, it's really a calling, and I have so much respect for people who dedicate their lives to that. My father was a teacher, my grandfather was a
yeah.
teacher, and they really took their job seriously. And I don't know, I mean, I think there are a lot of really good teachers, and I think that being active and being as a community person and wanting a better place for our kids is consistent with wanting a better place and a better environment for the people who are really good at it and all the sacrifices they've made, because they deserve to. I mean, the teachers who are doing a terrific job deserve to have colleagues that are also doing a terrific job. They don't, I mean, they've got enough to worry about than, to have to be thinking, oh my God, is this colleague, is this other person, being inappropriate? I mean, they have a lot on their plates.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And yeah, and it's certainly there's 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 a lot written and a lot known about how stressful it is for educators. I'm blessed too, like you. I had, I think, in my immediate family, if you count my parents, my brothers and sisters, and my nieces and their kids, there are 12 school teachers
Wow.
just in that crowd. Yeah. So yeah, we even 11 or 12.
And I was lucky enough to have your father as one of my professors
Yeah,
in
my
law
dad was a
school.
teacher. That's right. So yeah,
He was fantastic.
they are, what they do is, again, it goes back to when we all got together as a community, as a society, and said, what do we want government to do? what are the things that we want government to what do we want to build to protect us and make us a safe and good and healthy community? Schools, that was a big part of it. We want our kids to be safe. We want our kids to have opportunity. And so that's a big place for a lot of energy. And then, I think the other areas we kind of touched on them, these other non-governmental entities are similar. We expect the after-school program at at whether it's the YMCA or Boys and Girls Club to be run in a way that is, fits right inside a box and nothing outside of that box.
Professional.
Very professional, that's child serving, that everything they do is to enhance the experience for the children, and anything that deviates from that is not allowed. And those are the kinds of things that unfortunately we get involved in as lawyers, you and I and others, when things do go wrong. And it has the effect of ensuring that those institutions do a better job and do those jobs well. So it's
Not just about, I mean, it involves appropriate supervision too, right? I mean, that's what a lot of stuff boils down to.
and parenting is really, I mean, think about it. Parenting is really tough. I mean, it's hard enough, just the actual part of being a good mom, a good dad, a good stepfather, a good, stepmom. But we delegate so much of that to others. We have to. And it starts out with daycare. Oh my God. I mean, have you ever felt more vulnerable than dropping your toddler off at daycare? Like, my God, and I got to go to work and I have no idea what's going to happen. At kindergarten, elementary school, all those, we delegate. And then we're excited when our kid says, yeah, I really want to be in dance. I want ballet. Like, fantastic. If I can afford it, we'll do it. And then you turn your kid over to this other batch of strangers who you've never met. And so it's just one after another of that experience. And so when somebody violates that trust that you put in them, when you put trust in that coach, or you put that trust in that ballet teacher or that drama teacher, and they violate that trust, it is a terrible, grievous injury to the child, but it's also a permanent wound to the parent. It's just, there isn't any way to fix that. Money doesn't do it. Sometimes making the institution do a better job starts to make it hurt less. That's all.
Is there anything else you want to talk about today that we didn't cover? I mean, we could talk about all kinds of stuff for hours, but
Hours. I don't, I think that I'll tell you what I tell almost most parents that call me that have a claim is that what they most want when they're calling me about a claim is they want the situation to resolve without a lawsuit. I mean, what they want is to maintain their sovereignty, their status as parents, that they get to make decisions. And sometimes, sadly, the only choice that will provide relief to the family is hiring me to go and pursue the wrongdoers, the people who hurt their kid. That is what I do. That's what I've been doing all day, every day since 1988. But it's not, I try to encourage parents to think through how they can recapture that feeling that they lost when the person, violated their trust, how they recapture their authority with their kid and rebuild that relationship in a way that doesn't have judges and courts and lawyers involved. And sometimes that's not possible. Frequently that's not possible. But I ask parents to always keep that in mind, that even if they hire me in my firm to handle the case, they still are the parent. We're not going to, as lawyers, ever usurp their authority or take that away from them. They still parent that child, and the decisions that are going to be made they're going to, when we talk about best interest of the child, best interest of the child, this is the best interest, that's the best interest. The best interest of the child, we start with where the parents are and what they see as best interest of that child. And, and sometimes it's a conversation that lasts a year, but it's a conversation we talk whenever you're hiring a lawyer to handle a case for your child. It's not going to be us very often. There are lots of other law firms out there, but I urge parents to think about that as they do not give up your status as the parent in making you're not going to make legal decisions. You're not going to make decisions about what to put in the lawsuit or experts to call a trial, but you are going to be always held accountable for making the best decision for your child, and don't ever give that up. That's all I'd say.
Yeah, yeah. I think I've seen parents kind of blame themselves for not understanding a situation sooner. I don't know that I think that that's not necessarily reasonable. I understand where that comes from, but I think that the people who are intentional predators kind of know how to make friends and conceal what they're doing. And I think, I've never seen a situation where I can say, oh yeah, that's definitely the parent fell down there. I mean, maybe, but I think that's quite rare. And, because that's just such a special relationship. And I think you're right. And I think it's the parent's job to continue to offer advice and guidance to their child, that emotional support to help process, and try not to be there for the emotional kind of aspect of the child too. And it's not about them, it's about the child. And they need to support that child's emotional process. It can't, the parent is harmed, but it can't be about the parent. It's always bring it back around to the child and what their needs are, because they're in the more vulnerable situation as children.
You're right. Absolutely. Absolutely right. So,
Hmm. Well, I mean, can I ask you what you do for fun? I mean, tell me, this is the question I ask everyone. Tell me about your favorite New Mexico day trip, and your favorite New Mexico meal.
well, my favorite New Mexico meal, I'll just say, my favorite New Mexico food, first of all, is pozole. And whether it's
Hmm.
pozole with pork or pozole with menudo or both, it's pozole. And it is, my wife jokes, I would eat pozole 3 meals a day, every day. And I've been doing that for a long time. If she weren't around, that's pretty much what she'd eat. I mean, if she didn't do something about it, that's pretty much what she'd eat too. Sometimes with lemon, sometimes with oregano, sometimes with lots of onions, sometimes with not a lot of onions, sometimes it's really spicy, sometimes not spicy. It's just, I don't know. It just reminds me of when I was a kid, and every time I smell it in the house, it's just, I don't know. It's kind of Christmas. It's just something that has never left me, and it's also really easy to make. You can't really screw it up. And when I was a long time ago, when I didn't have a lot of money, it's pretty inexpensive. You can throw together a pozole with whatever you got, with just a few bucks. So that's that.
So that reminds me of my grandmother. And so for me, it's a very emotional meal. Although I do have this little tidbit for, I found an incredibly good vegetarian pozole. I'm not vegetarian, but I don't eat a lot of pork. At Bike and Coffee, they have a really
Oh,
good
wow. Yeah, I've
vegetarian
heard
pozole.
about that. I've heard about that. I'm not sure I'm ready for that yet, but I've heard
Check it
about it.
out sometime. Okay, what else?
Oh, and my favorite day trip. I mean, I live here in Albuquerque. One of my favorite things, and has been since I was really in high school, is to just go up to the Sandias, just hike to the peak from the, either a Pinot Trail or Embutito, or just a hike from the Albuquerque side to the peak or the crest. Sometimes not the peak, and just sit there for a while and come back, because you can do it. You can really fit it into, usually if you only have like 3.5 or 4 hours, you can do it. And and you might not get all the way there, but it's still an amazing opportunity. And one of the things that everybody lives in Albuquerque who goes into the Sandias knows a mile from the parking lot, you're not going to see anybody. It's incredible. You'll see 3 people in a whole day. And this spectacular mountain is, close to 500,000 people. And for some reason, you still feel really alone and private up there. I understand the Sandia Nation is asking to get a whole lot of it back under their control. So I just want to say I don't hike in any of those areas. I just hike over on the near South Peak, but that's a great day trip, and it's the kind of thing, if you, and at least you had this happen sometimes where all of a sudden, like, you realize whatever you had scheduled for the afternoon, it could be a hearing, it could be some court thing, it could be a client that's supposed to come in, and all of a sudden they cancel, and you look at your watch and say, well, I got the whole afternoon off, and nobody has put anything else on my calendar yet. See ya, I'm out of here, and just head up there, and you just feel completely different after a couple hours in the mountains. That's
Right.
yeah. So
No, that's so important. It's number one, it's literally perspective if you get high enough, right? But also just being in nature and feeling what little bit of wind, a breeze, sun. It's so priceless.
yeah.
Yeah.
I'm not encouraging anybody else to go though, because I love it.
Right.
Okay. Anyway, listen, it's been great talking to you, Felice. Thank you.
Thank you so much for making the time to talk to me. I look forward to hearing more about your important work in the future.
Well, thanks. Talk to you again, okay?
Okay, take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Before we wrap up, we want to thank our sponsors. This episode is brought to you by the New Mexico Trial Lawyers Association Alliance for Justice. We want to thank our Chili Circle supporters, the Tracy Law Firm, and Curtis and Company. Through their generous investments, they're safeguarding New Mexicans' right to access justice and a jury.
Thanks for joining us on New Mexico Legal Lowdown. If today's conversation changed how you see the legal system, share it with a friend. We'll be back next time with another trial lawyer fighting for New Mexicans. Produced and powered by LawPods.